Thank you so much for joining this evening. I am truly, truly honored to be here to share some thoughts about Burundi and Rwanda genocides. Thank you, Dr. Vedwachter, for the beautiful introduction. And yes, we met miles and miles away, and I'm truly grateful to be able to now share the same space in your own institution. I am deeply honored by the invitation. And I'd like to first thank Dr. Rebecca Klein-Peshova, and of course, Dr. Nadej Vedwachter and Sarah Paule for the invitation. It means a lot to me because being Burundian, being a Burundian who didn't even know she was Black until she was 30 years old. 30, yeah, I didn't know I was Black until then. And then a survivor of genocide. To be here to share some thoughts means a lot to me. So thank you. I'd like to let you know that what I'm going to share with you is just, these are only my own opinions, my own thoughts. They do not represent my institution, Northeastern University, and they do not they are not from the Center for Genocide and Human Rights Research. These are just my own thoughts. So in order to organize our conversation here, and I'm going to go through the slides, but I'm excited to hear your own questions, to hear your own thoughts, suggestions, because as you will find out, I have more questions than answers as I engage on this journey to study these genocides. So I will first contextualize the topic, and share with you what's been my guiding question throughout, and then we'll dig deeper to understand what these twin countries share and what's different from the historical background, cultural and political, socio-political, socio-cultural, socio-historical. So we dive into that, deep into that, to try to see if there's anything we can take home that also guides our understanding of genocide and human rights in general. Okay, so, if you've never heard of Burundi, I won't ask you to raise your hand. But you're not the only one. You're a member of a majority. Why? Burundi is a tiny country. Now, I won't say it's the same for Rwanda, because most of you have heard of the genocide, right? If nothing else, Hotel Rwanda, right? So many people have heard of Rwanda, but Burundi not as much. But these are twin countries. They share a lot. They are landlocked, both of them. Let's see if I can use, yes, I can use my cursor here. So they are in this, they are in this tiny, so this region here, as you can see, you can barely see them on the map. Not because the map is not huge, just because they are tiny. But imagine how much noise they've made out there in the world. These little tiny countries, but so much noise, unfortunately, not for good things, but for a horrible past. So they share, the size is almost the same. Same size as Maryland. They also share the languages. So if a Rwandan and a Burundian are speaking, they don't need a translator. They speak the same, two varieties of the same language. And then also they share the ethnic groups. Same 3 ethnic groups as we're going to go through those, and cultural traditions. We have the same kind of jokes, the same kind of proverbs. I mean, so much that we share, but unfortunately, we also share a horrific past. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to kind of give you the gist of these similarities and differences before we dive deep into what really happened. Why did they pick up machetes to kill each other? With everything we know about these two countries that I'm going to share with you. So the 1972 genocide in Burundi and the 1994 genocide in Rwanda were ethnic in nature. Now, I'm not saying that the ethnic groups were natural. I'm saying the troubles were ethnic in nature. In Burundi, the extremist Tutsi killed more than 200,000 Hutu elite, primarily males. There were women also were killed, but primarily males. Scholars often refer to it as a selective genocide. In Rwanda, on the other hand, the extremist Hutu killed Tutsi and moderate Hutus without distinction. In Burundi, the Tutsi-dominated government orchestrated the genocide, and similarly, in Rwanda, the Hutu-dominated government was behind the propaganda and eventually the killings of so many, almost 1 million Tutsi and moderate Hutu. So, but what's puzzling in all of this is that most people killed neighbors, they killed relatives, they killed people they knew. And the killings happened in such a closeness that many scholars have called them personal killings. Because if it's one thing to take a gun and shoot someone and say, oh, I didn't mean to kill, oh. But a machete over and over for someone you know, someone you've shared so much with. This happened in Burundi and it happened in Rwanda. And that is puzzling to me. They believed in humanness. Before they picked up a machete, they shared. I can give you examples and examples of how they lived together. Many people have done research on Ubuntu, the humanness that they all shared. It's a way of life. This is not something theoretical out there. It's the way of life. That's how they shared everything. I remember as a child how if someone had gotten sick and they were behind on the planting season, the neighbors would go to the person's piece of land, and they would cultivate and they would plant. Then they would pick up. They would come to the same level that everybody was on, so ready for the next season, right? That they didn't. This person was sick. Didn't need to recruit. They saw it. They saw that this person was in need, and they went and helped. I can't tell you how many times my mom would send me to fetch water for a person who needed it, and the person didn't have to ask. And there are so many examples I can give you of how they shared everything. Okay? So I could give you many examples, but what's most important here is that this Ubuntu is shared by many countries in Africa, especially Central and Southern Africa. But Burundi and Rwanda absolutely lived it. I know it, I saw it, and people today is actually the blessing that they have. I often, in the work I do, I write about the Ubuntu being a blessing and a curse. Later on, I talk more about the curse, how it's a curse, how it was a curse, at least during genocide, right? But it is a lived experience. Desmond Tutu puts it beautifully in this description. Ubuntu is a way of being in the world. It is a word that condenses the true essence of what it is to be human. my humanity is intrinsically linked to yours. Therefore, I am human because I belong, I participate, and share being in the community. So you and I are made for interdependence and to complement one another. So how do you go from that? That was lived, not something they believed in their heads. They lived it, and still they picked up a machete to commit genocide. That's puzzling to me. So let's now try to dive into detail and try to understand what really happened to these people who loved each other, who helped each other. And by the way, I am not romanticizing Ubuntu. It's not perfect. But for this level, it really worked. People helped each other, supported each other. And that's then the question that we get into. Okay. So, yes, there are 3 ethnic groups in both countries. Okay, the Hutu always the majority in each of these countries, but majority in number. Okay, in Burundi, majority in number, but for a long time not in power until 2005. In Rwanda, the Hutu were a majority in number and in power for a long time, until 1994. Okay? The Tutsis, minority in number in both countries, but in power, they are majority in Burundi, but minority in Rwanda. Minority in power, okay? The Twa people are the minority in both countries. They are just 1% of the population. And they've been used over the years. They've been used one way or another by the Tutsis and by the Hutus. Okay? So, but at this point, if you ask me, how do you tell a Tutsi from a Hutu? Please don't listen to what colonizers have described, this straight, narrow nose and all of this. No. If you walk into Burundi or Rwanda, sometimes, I mean, there may be some extremes, but they are the same people overall. And of course, there's intermarriages that has happened. So over the years, you really can't tell today who's Hutu. So how do you know who's a Hutu and who's not? The father. So it's a patriarchal society. So my mother is a Tutsi. My father is a Hutu. But I am Hutu because my father was Hutu. Okay? So, guess what? The being Hutu and the being Tutsi has to do with a cow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's interesting when I talk to my students and I say cow, and they go, most of them are from cities, urban centers. So talking about cow, those of you who may have been lucky, I'm going to add lucky, to grow up on farms, because there's so much fun on the farms, right? But those of you who know cows, they are very special. But in Burundi and Rwanda, they're incredibly special. To the point that a beautiful girl, we say this girl is so beautiful. She has eyes like those of a calf. That's how we talk about beauty. So cows mean a lot in these 2 cultures, in these 2 countries. But, so when my father, as I said, was Hutu. But growing up, before they killed him, I always heard him say that our Hutu was going to bring us some food at the end of the month, or some beer, or something special. So we had a Hutu. Why did we have a Hutu? Because my father gave a cow to a certain family, and that family signed a contract to bring us some special food that we didn't grow in our region. So he kept bringing us food. Fast forward, in 1972, once my father was killed, my mother looked at that family and said, when they brought the special food, she told them, now mind you, this is a Tutsi woman. She said, this is the last time you're bringing food to us. She broke that, she canceled that contract. She said, go take care of your family. Yep, that's my mother. And yeah, I'm very grateful for that because I got to learn from someone who practiced social justice, even if she didn't realize that's what she was doing, but she did it. So again, this difference between Hutu Tutsi. So the Hutu having a Hutu, that doesn't add up, right? Two, when I've been collecting testimonies to understand what happened to during the 1972 genocide, and one of the questions I ask is this one: when did you find out you were Hutu? And many of them say in 1965, if they are much older, because that's when Hutus were first arrest of Hutus, 1965. But most of them say 1972. That's when they found out they were Hutu, or found out they were Tutsi. Very interesting. Guess when I found out I was Hutu? I was 13 years old. I was in a boarding school, and another kid told me that I was Hutu. And not only that, she said, you're Hutu, and your father was Hutu, that's why he was killed. At that point, I didn't know he was killed. I was told he had fled and managed to get to Tanzania. So many years after he was killed, I didn't even know. But this kid happened to know that I was Hutu, my father was Hutu, that's why he was killed. Okay. And she adds, oh, by the way, and your mother is a Tutsi. And I was like, why didn't she choose to be Hutu like us? Especially if you die when you're Hutu. That's strange. So I couldn't wait to get home to ask her why she didn't choose to be Hutu like us. And of course, that's a story of another time. So many people didn't know that they were Hutu or Tutsi. Now, so that's when I asked about ethnic group. But when I said, so when did you find out about your clan? And the reaction is with joy, with pride. They say, oh, I always knew. Clans being more natural than the ethnic groups. You see? Earlier on, really, it was more of a socio-economic relationship. But then with the colonization, it turned into a socio-political distinction. Okay, so yes, became a socio-political distinction because of colonizers who decided that they needed to divide the Hutus from the Tutsis so they can rule, divide and conquer. So in Burundi, earlier on, and even in Rwanda, the colonizers privileged the Tutsis. Then later on in Rwanda, there was a shift. Around 1959, there was a shift where the colonizers, the Belgian colonizers, decided to start privileging the Hutus and supported them in the 1959 revolution. So, power shift, that's really what brought the first trouble, the source of trouble, power, greed. So Prunier says it this way. The struggle for cultural dominance and subjugation among the Hutu and Tutsi, which is the central players in the recent massacres in Rwanda, was exploited by racially obsessed Europeans. He shows how Western colonialists helped to construct a Tutsi identity as a superior racial type because of their distinctly non-Negro features to facilitate greater control over the Rwandese. Yeah. So that's it. That's it. To stay in power, to control, make it easy to control. So fast forward in 1959, there was a Hutu revolution. It was due to the fact that the colonialists had developed this feudalism, a system of servitude, where Hutus worked for Tutsis. And even like field, they would dig, they would cultivate, but serve Tutsis. And so to the point that there was that anger that was cultivated in the system. So Hutus revolted in 1959, supported by who? The Belgian geologist, William Logist. He is the one who realized that he should support the majority to keep the power, the Belgian power in Rwanda. So as a result, there were 336,000 Tutsi who fled to neighboring countries. Think about just now what that means. So many Tutsis around in Burundi, in Congo, in Uganda, in Tanzania. They will remember that their home is Rwanda. They never became Rwanda. They never got the citizenship of those countries. They always wanted to go home. Among those, 150,000 were in Burundi. So that's 1959, right? They found a friendly regime, a friendly government, a majority Tutsi government. So Rwandan Tutsis go to Burundi, find Tutsi who are in power. Think about that. So the Tutsi government realized, so the Tutsi are being chased away from their country, Rwanda, because they are Tutsi. What could happen to Burundi, to the Tutsi in Burundi, right? So if geologists hadn't supported the revolution, the Hutu revolution, of course with the Kaiba and the king, maybe we wouldn't have had the Tutsi refugees in Burundi, and maybe we may not have had 1972 genocide. And yes, I know I'm using maybes, but I'm just asking, right? Just wondering. So from what was politically irrelevant distinctions between Hutu and Tutsi, now all of a sudden it becomes a political divide. Yeah. A rich Hutu could become a Tutsi. In fact, I know people who became Tutsi who were Hutus who paid the pots of beer to become Tutsi, because it was just a social status, right? It wasn't a matter of, it was more of a socio-economic, social class kind of distinction. But that didn't last. They started killing each other. So then if they were all mixed, if they occupied the same political positions, how did it happen that now all of a sudden Tutsi, and I'm going to focus on Burundi, Tutsi were in positions of power? How did that happen? So Belgians realized if they can impose a condition that those who know how to read and write will be in positions of power, of leadership, then they will get it. Guess what? They started putting in school Tutsi. Once they had Tutsi in school who knew how to read and write, then of course Hutus had no business being in positions of leadership. So that's really what happened in a nutshell. So now you have people who are politically divided, polarized, Of course, Hutus are not happy in Burundi that they are in a position, that the Tutsis now are in position of power, and Hutus have been eliminated in positions, in political positions. So this is what I know from digging a little bit and from my own experience. In 1972, there was an uprising. Hutus killed Tutsi. That's a fact. But I have a number of questions about that. Because where they killed, those two Hutu went to kill in a region where there were very few Tutsi. The Tutsi who were in that region were only there because they were sent to be leaders, administrators, chiefs of callings. So there were not many Tutsi there. Why did the Hutu start killing there? That's question number one. Question number two, when they attacked to kill the Tutsi, the Hutu killed the Tutsi, the Tutsi government that had all the powers, all the possibilities, why didn't they say, oh, our people have been killed, let's gather their bodies and show the world what just happened? There isn't a single body that was dropped. But we know because there are people who lost their loved ones. We know that there are Tutsi who were killed by Hutu. Number three question is this one. When it happened, the uprising, we were told they were enemies of a nation from outside the country. In fact, we have foreign names for them. Mai Mai, Mulele. These were from Congolese languages. Why call them foreigners? Why say they were foreigners? Guess what? There were people among those who were killing who spoke Kiswahili only. They didn't speak Kirundi. Another question there. Right? So I could go on and on and on. So I have a number of questions I haven't found answers for. Okay? So the next few slides are really disturbing. So if you prefer to not look, it's only 2 slides. So, but this is, I'm going to show you in the past. So here in 1972, people lined up to go get killed because they were called on lists. They were on lists and they were called one by one. They would line them up and go load them on trucks and kill them. That was in 1970. So recently, 2021, they started finding mass graves, many, many mass graves. And in fact, one person was able to recognize their father by the gap, the teeth. I want to keep those images up. But yes, the mass graves do indicate that there was massacre, not because it's been denied, not for 10 years, not 10, 20, for 50 years. The people can say, no, it didn't happen. No. Then mass graves were just, whoosh. The bodies, those dead, spoke. And so not only people were killed, but then their property was taken. So this letter here is a message, like a piece of paper that a person was given to go to someone's house and say, yeah, the property is mine now. The administrator gave it to me. Like there's a group of like some advisors or counselors from the commune, from the local administration, they gave me the permission to take your land, to take your property. That was it. So my father's businesses, stores were taken just like that because they could, right? Because they could take them. And then, of course, people became enemies of the nation. They come in all kinds of names. I was an enemy of the nation by the age, 11. I was an enemy of the nation. But so the violence was real, based on really nothing. Based on nothing. The government decided that we couldn't talk about it, that the survivors, victims, nothing happened. Oh, you lost your father? Oh, he was an enemy of the nation. That's it. And all of us were enemies of the nation, those who lost our loved ones. But guess what helped the government most? It's the culture. There are so many elements of our culture that made it easy for the government to reinforce that imposed silence. So respect of authority, that's a thing. We have proverbs and proverbs that say you've got to respect the authority. So with one is, the shoulders grow, but they cannot surpass the neck. Stay where you are. You cannot go beyond those above you. Then there's respect of the dead, right? You cannot. So here, especially in April, we say their names to remember those who were killed, that we lost to genocide, to Holocaust. Say their names. And I'm like, no, don't say their names. They won't be able to rest. That's what we believed, that if you say their names, their spirits will not be able to rest. So we had to not say their names. Even today, I'm not supposed to say Gwasa Bonaventure, my father. My mom would freak out. And so we had to be quiet and just keep moving as if nothing happened. And especially among neighbors. And so there are other proverbs like Agapfuye Kabazwizvu, the dead, how to say? So the dead are only known to the dirt. So don't talk about them, okay? Leka kuzura kaboze, what's rotten stays there. Don't try to play with it. So again, as I said, Ubuntu, this idea of trusting each other so much, to the point that when people came with a list and say, you come, you follow me, it could be just one person calling a large group of people, say, come, you follow me. And they all followed. The first group goes and doesn't come back. And then this guy comes back and say, okay, and you follow me. And they were told they are going to watch over the enemy, like to protect the nation somewhere. But they never came back. Why? Because those who followed said, oh, he's my neighbor. He can't possibly kill me. We know each other, we've shared everything. So they kept following and they got killed and never came back. So it's that trust that really got them killed many times. So I could go on and on with this. Here's one last element about culture that really got us sober in terms of silencing, that enhanced that imposed the silence from the government. Photos. So when my father was among the lucky few who had money, who could afford taking photos. So all of us families, we had photos, all the children, we had photos in the house. So when I went to boarding school at age 13, those photos were in the house. Then I come home, they are all gone. I said, what happened? Where are the photos? The culture says, you're not supposed to keep the photos of dead people. They were all burnt. So we don't have a single photo, and there are so many other families that did the same thing, except those who were in the urban centers are the ones who knew better, who kept them. Okay? So that's that about culture that really kind of helped reinforce that like made it easy for the government to silence people, the survivors and the victims. To this day, not a single person has been held responsible for the 1972 genocide. Yeah, guess what? People lived with mass graves. They knew where the mass graves were and lived with the perpetrators for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, still like that. Perpetrators, mass graves. Just think about that kind of trauma. And those people who were traumatized that much, who are also in power today, that's so total impunity in Burundi. 52 years later, nothing. René Marchand encourages us, and this is many people, of course, encourage us to remember in order to heal. You know, many people have, it's like you can't expect to just heal, to just make it go away, especially at the national level. So the genocide, and I truly believe the genocide, the silence to genocide, and all the trauma that comes with it are the cause of the cycle of violence that we've seen over and over again in these countries, especially in Burundi. On the other hand, Rwanda, that's doing it the right way. They are memorizing, they are remembering, they are holding accountable the genocidaires, those who killed, right? So this is where we would hope for the best. If everyone is allowed to mourn, if everyone is allowed to talk about it, to talk about the ones they lost, that'll be the right way. Okay, so actually one element I should have added is that the imposed silence also started earlier on. In Burundi, the name of what happened was event, some kind of event. So ikiza. Nobody is responsible. It's ikiza, an event. Like if I say the window broke, I'm not saying someone broke it. I'm just saying it happened, right? So that's how they named it, ikiza. Just like it was actually the word that was also used during famine. That was ikiza. Okay, so the genocide in 1972 was ikiza for until recently, where I think we borrowed the word from Rwanda. I'm not 100% sure. I still have to verify that, where we call it now ihonyabwoko. Okay, but in Rwanda right away, they called it genocide, and they've been holding, they punished those who are accountable. So in Burundi, I like these metaphors, because especially for Burundi, where the genocide became the elephant in the room, where we all whispered. We knew, it's there. It was genocide. But somehow we couldn't talk about it publicly. Collectively, we couldn't. But once we got into the houses, doors closed, that's where it came out as it just happened. And I'll keep going so that we can set time. Okay, so the cycle of violence, it happened in Burundi, it happened in Rwanda, and I truly believe it's because we never dealt with it collectively, publicly. We never addressed it. Until in Rwanda, it's until 94, in Burundi until 93, even afterwards, actually in Burundi, 2015, where atrocities too that happened. So now, did the world know? Yes, they did, okay? The Swiss journalists talked about it. I'll keep going. New York Times had it, an article published in 1972. Le Monde knew it, an article in 1972. And I keep going. And even the Atlantic Monthly sidebar knew it. Stanley Meisler really wrote, and I'm going to quickly read this. The enormity and horror of it all are exposed by what a visitor does not see in Bujumbura, in which 85% of the population is Hutu. Yet a visitor can find a few Hutus in Bujumbura. It is a little like entering Warsaw after World War II and looking for Jews. And I keep going. So, did people try to talk? Yes, they did. A group, we almost had a genocide, another 1972 genocide in 1988. But brave group of people, where men and women, got together and wrote a letter to then President Pierre Buyoya. And they also wrote to the international community, and that's how we're able to avoid another genocide. But many people got killed. But this group Many of them were imprisoned. They lost their jobs. Some were able to flee. They were tortured. So yes, silencing was real for a long time in Burundi. And as a conclusion, one asks, where is the hope? Where is the hope? We do have some assets actually right now. We have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that's trying and that has determined that this indeed was a genocide based on the work they've done already. But the government, the president is yet to accept that as a genocide. We have testimonies that tell us what happened. We have a large young population, just like all over Africa. We have young population that's interested in learning what happened so that it doesn't happen again. We still have Ubuntu, although it's the Ubuntu that really made people trust so much that they got killed, but also it's the very fabric that brings them together to heal. And there are also some organizations, NGOs that are helping, that are building slowly, bottom up, trying to bring healing and reconciliation, but we still don't have a national collective public memorialization. And more importantly, accountability. We still don't have that. So there are many unrecognized traumas, of course, from all the cycle, all the violence that's been happening over the years. And when you think about it, like I said earlier, the leaders of today are orphans of yesterday, of 1972 and more. So there are so many people who walk around in Burundi with wounds, deep wounds that are not healed, haven't started even at here. So what to do justice, truth, public and collective memorization and healing for everyone, and I'm insisting for everyone, look like in the countries that have suffered so much. That's a question I ask. How about reparations? What would they look like? Should the countries even eliminate the ethnic words, Hutu, Tutsi, in the vocabulary? Would that help if Kirundi, Kinyarwanda didn't have those words in them? And lastly, I'm just going to read this quote from René Le Marchand. I think this says it all. In the case of Burundi and Rwanda, multiple and contestable truths, manipulated polls, persisting inequalities, unrecognized collective traumas, unwanted refugees doubling as genocidaires, all of the above are among the hurdles that stand in the way of a sustainable regional stability. Thank you very much.
So we have time now for Q&A, and we'll welcome your questions. We have a bit of time.
Yes, yes. Yes.
I have a couple questions. The first one was the 27 people that stood up and sent the letter. Do you know, were they Hutus, were they Tutsis, were they a combination?
They were all Hutus. Yes, they were Hutus. Men and women, yeah.
And do you know, were there like Tutsis that stood beside them? Like, was there kind of a coming together at any point? The Hutus and Tutsis to stand up against it?
At that time, I'm not aware of that, but later on, today, there are many Tutsis and Hutu who come together to fight the injustices, absolutely.
And my second question was, you had mentioned earlier, and I just want to clarify, you had talked about how there was a group of Hutus that killed Tutsis and, minority Tutsis in some area. So are you saying that was the catalyst that started the Tutsis then fighting back and killing the Hutus? Is that kind of what started it, or?
Right, okay. Yeah, so was the killing of Tutsis in 1972 at the beginning, which happened on April 29th, was that the catalyst for the killings of the Hutus? That's a very good question. That's what they say, that they were fighting back, okay? And I say that's what they say because today we see many, many signs that say, why did that happen? Why didn't they stop it? So there is one Tutsi military chief. It was also governor of a region, the southern region. In the place where they started the killing, the Hutu started the killing, he was in charge of it. So he heard that Hutus were organizing to attack Tutsi. He heard of it. And he says that, and I have his testimony. And he says, I wrote to the government to ask for permission to go check, to go search the homes and arrest people if need be. But twice he sent the letter. First, they didn't respond. He sent another one. They didn't respond. He said, and then he says, well, because maybe I was a small person. No, you can't be in charge of a whole army in the south and be the governor of the province and be a small person. So that wasn't right. We can't buy that. But why didn't the government respond to him, yes or no? Or did he tell the truth? I mean, his name has come up over and over again among the testimonies we've collected as the person who incited the killings. You see, so but again, there are many questions. Was it really an excuse or not to kill? And why were there so many lists? 1971, many lists were established. There was like a census. And the census was a census of Hutu and the homes they owned and the cars they owned. So that was found in archives that were, of course, not well taken care of because they never imagined anybody would come searching in those archives. So the archives had a list of people in 1971 they have a car, it's a Mercedes, or the home has 5 rooms. And why? Why did they have those lists and the people and what they owned? Yeah. So it's a question I'm still also asking. I don't have a full answer, but I wonder. Yeah, thank you for asking. Yes.
It was a great talk. It was very insightful.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. First is, you mentioned that people could change their ethnicity by giving the peers. That was quite interesting. If that is the case, like if one can change their ethnicity, then how can we really differentiate Hutus from Tutsis? Like, what is it exactly?
Right. Very good question. So if people could change their ethnicity, how can you distinguish them in the end? And the answer is, you really don't know. So there was one way you could tell earlier on, during colonization, the tax books had the ethnic identification. But how many people could keep looking into the books to see who's who? Okay, so when we're out and about in our social lives, you don't keep looking into the books to see who's who, right? But the point here, to your point, there wasn't a way of distinguishing them except family by family. The stories we tell, right? Our own families. Yet that family over there is Hutu, we are Tutsi. That family there is Tutsi, we are Hutu, and so on. So it's really passed on oral tradition that we're good at, and when I say we're good at, because Burundi has a very recent writing system, so we have more of oral traditions than anything else. So, but people passed on that knowledge, just even with the clans. It's like, how do you know who's who? They talk about it. They just say it that way. So we were told we're Hutu. Okay, that's what I would tell my children. They are Hutu. And it keeps passing on. So it's not about the looks. We eat the same, religion same, everything's the same, except who is your father. If your father is a Hutu, you're Hutu. So that's how it happened. But yes, you could change. And those who became who Tutsified them or Hutufied themselves, in Kirundi we say kwihutura, to lose the Hutu and become Tutsi. Okay, and then you tell your family you are Tutsi, and then you become Tutsi for generations to come. Okay, I don't know if I answered your question.
I have just one more question. I was wondering, how is the situation now in Burundi? Like how is it between these two groups currently?
It's complicated, and I say it because officially Tutsi and Hutu attend each other's weddings, celebrate social gatherings. So you don't have people with machetes on the streets fighting each other. But once they get inside their homes, they talk about it. It's still real. I asked a young man, Tutsi, in the fall, who was at Northeastern University, that's where we met, and I said, what do you think is the worst day of Burundi in its history? And the answer was absolutely surprised me, but I appreciated it. He said, the day Micombero was born was the worst day of Burundi. Micombero was the president in 1972. He was responsible for killing the last king. He was responsible for dividing, so many things. The killing of the prince, who the population loved so much. He is until recently the hero of Burundi. So he told me that, and I thought about it. I said, yeah, things could have been different, right? What's the relationship today? It looks like it's okay, but do you know how I know it's not okay? Every time there's violence, like the moment someone says, hey, if you don't kill, they'll kill you. If you haven't healed, if you haven't dealt with it, you remember what happened and you act accordingly. Especially the young people. And now, what comes into place now is they've been traumatized, generational trauma is real, right? But there is also poverty. When the young people are poor, they're easily dragged into militia, into this, and then it's easy for them to participate in the killings. But the violence that's been happening, 1972, 79, 88, really, if we were okay, why are we still killing each other based on ethnic groups? That's really what I feel, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Riveting talk.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank
powerful. You. I was also completely blown away by the comment on ethnicity. And I found very interesting your comment about the clans. People would identify as a clan, but ethnicity, at least at some point, could change. And so I'm wondering if I'm correct in what I heard you say, or my analysis, which is that it sounded like the Belgians, wanted to make ethnicity very important, more important than it was naturally.
Yes.
And so is it your opinion that had that not happened, because to me that means the clan, the relationship of a clan was then diminished. And had the clan been more important, do you think that would have prevented this violence?
Thank you so much for that beautiful question. So let me just kind of rephrase this. If Europeans hadn't used the ethnic groups to divide people, like made the ethnic groups more important than the clans, if the clans had remained more important, which is absolutely true, the clans were more important, politically speaking. They were recruited, they were the ones, this clan, Awajiji, served in the kingdom, in the royal place. They had roles, different roles, the clans. So, but the Hutu Tutsi was almost irrelevant politically. So to your point, I would agree with you that clans, if clans were not supplanted by the ethnic groups, maybe we wouldn't have had the genocide that we experienced in 1972. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
My question is, I know schools are very different in a country, but I'm just curious about history textbooks. And also, on April 29th of every year, how many memorials are there across the country or any state-sponsored?
Yeah, thank you so much. In terms of education, what's going on? Is there anything in the textbooks, in the curriculum? And then on April 29th, are there memorials happening, any activities? So to answer your first question, as a person in education also, that's like, thank you for asking, but I don't have an answer. It's a dream of mine. I wouldn't mind going straight into books. Like, what do we put in the books? Let's educate, let's train our young people through material, curriculum that's there about the history, the true history of Burundi. By the way, I don't even know what the true will be, but nothing yet, because the country has to recognize it first, right? That's number one. We have a long way to go with that one. Then April 29th, in the diaspora, yes, that is, people are doing what they can. But inside Burundi, it's tricky because the government itself officially, like the president hasn't accepted it as a genocide. Okay, he hasn't declared it. So some people do some activities, but not at the national level, not the way Rwanda has done it, for example. So right now, the remains, I'm sure you must be wondering where they are. So December 2023, I went to Burundi with a group of faculty and students to collect stories, testimonies. And for the first time, I stood in a room. So the remains are regionally from the south, they are in this one room. All the remains brought from mass graves, they are in one room in bags. Some are exposed a little bit open, but some in bags. That's why. So for the first time in December 2023, I stood in a room where the person who was guiding us, telling us about them, said, okay, I'm about to say something, I'm so sorry. Oops. I'm so sorry, but for Jeanine, your relatives may be here. The remains of your relatives may be here. So for the first time, I stood in a room where 90% sure they could be, they might have been in that room. My father, my brother, my cousins, because the mass graves from my region were all brought, the remains were brought in that room. That's it. That's what they are there. Memorization, anything. And what's really, again, the resources. They don't have resources. When the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started, they were going to have funding. But in 2015, it was cut, and they are functioning on 5% of what they were supposed to function on. So what can you do? What can they do with those remains? Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I'm struck, and correct me if I'm wrong here. When the Nazis took over and took out the populations that they wanted to take out, they gave their property to the local folks. And I think if we go back in history, we can see that the conquering group takes and gives to its own group.
Yes.
And so you have this even if you didn't want, if someone didn't want to participate, they almost were coerced into participating because of human nature, wanting to, well, if you're going to give it to me, I guess I'm going to take it. Right. And so it's this perverse bringing together of the naive population, I guess, or the not so hostile population, accepts it because they're getting something from the people who were killed, who were destroyed. And it means to me that law is such a thin veneer on society that if I kill you and I have the government's okay, I can just take your stuff. And too bad for you and too bad for your family. You don't really have any legal rights, you don't really exist. That's striking.
Absolutely. That's very well. That's absolutely a great observation. They can just have it, and that's exactly what happened. It's almost like you've seen. That's when I used to work in my father's stores when he was there, and now all of a sudden, they are some neighbors took over the stores, and they are doing business like nothing happened, just like that. And here you have orphans who are hungry, who are very poor, who went from being a high socioeconomic class to dirt poor. And these people who didn't pay anything, they're just there doing business like nothing happened. And we grow like they're just their children now in a great position. So, very well said. That's in human nature, or it's, they knew. And here's one thing again about the 1972 genocide where I wonder, again, another question, I wonder. So my father left one morning, was going to get a merchandise in Bujumbura, the capital city, from the village. And how did they know he had been killed? Because we don't have a body, nobody had a body of these people. How did they know he was killed? Because they came and changed the locks on all the stores. Who knew? How did they know that he got killed? And one of them, the person who took the main store, was his employee, was working in a boutique. So he went with him to Bujumbura. Did they get there? I don't know. But he came back, he changed the locks. And they started doing business with his own children, with the other, right? How did they know he had been killed? Because if he were to come back, they wouldn't have changed the locks. You see? So they just did it because they could, because the government supported them. And at the end of the day, I dare say, greed. Greed. Yeah, so thank you. Yes.
You show such grace when you describe all of this and you're explaining.
Thank you.
How do you navigate all of this emotionally?
Thank you so much for asking.
I admire you, my goodness.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. How do I navigate? Thank you for the kind words. So I'll make it quick. I know we don't have much time. When we were told you can't talk about it, so my father, before he died, he was very proud of me doing well in school. So it was at a time when they would rank us in school. Like if you were you got the first grade, the best grade, you were number 1 and number 2 and so on. So I was terrified to be more than number 5. So it's just my own terror. So I was between 1 and number 5, right? I knew that's how it has to be. So, but my father was just so proud. He would take my hand and walk around the stores, the marketplace, and just tell his other. Just my child was Yamenye, like passed, but Yabai Wakabiri was number 2. Like he would just walk me around telling people. And imagine this little girl, her father just being so proud of how she's doing. Guess what? In my head, keep going in school, keep going. That's what you know how to do. So I stayed in school and kept going in school. I could not afford, I needed to help my mother by staying in school, but I also knew I'm making my father proud by doing well in school. And at the time when I almost broke down, I already have my family, my children, I can't. I watched the Hotel Rwanda. That was a huge mistake. And it was a mess. And I knew something deep in there. And you won't believe, at that point I had said, I've forgiven everyone. All those people who have heard us, I've forgiven them. I even give testimony, what we call in French, témoignage. I went on, I've forgiven them. But when I watched Hotel Rwanda, it came out raw. It was horrible. Then I just nope, you can't deal with it. You have a family, you have the work. So I continued working. When I really opened up in 2013 with the support of René Romacha, really people, my colleagues, when I finally opened up publicly, I was a mess. I have to tell you, I was a mess. That forgiving, oh. So, but fast forward, now that I've been talking about, I'm back to that place of peace with it, where also my faith, really, I survived all of it thanks to my faith. I don't know how I would have done it actually without my faith, I have to say. So now because I've engaged in the healing process. This is one of the reasons why I really would like to support whoever, even if it's just one person who wants to engage in that healing process by telling their stories. I am so grateful to be able to do it. I feel like a privilege to own someone else's story. It's just so special. Sarah at Northwestern, the director of the Holocaust Educational Foundation, one time it told me, said, you know, Jeanine, I don't think we would have as many Holocaust centers, Holocaust studies, if survivors of Holocaust hadn't told their stories. And that's when I hit the road running. Say, okay, I've got to collect these stories before people pass away, you know. And that's what I've been doing. That also helps me to feel like I'm helping, you know, someone else to engage in this healing process. But thank you.
Machete, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.